Hi there folks, back again for another video. In this one we're going to be looking at a game that I have been waiting for a very long time. Well, I say a very long time, since kind of the middle of last year, 2022. Was very lucky to be able to get my hands on a copy of this via the old Amazonia, as it was taking forever to get this from other retailers because it has been sold out everywhere for a very long time. But anyway, so this is The War of the Ring, the card game by Ian Brody, and has been published by Ares Games. And in this, I thought I'd just give you my first impressions and discussions on this before diving in and giving it a go potentially in the future and doing a proper full review. But yeah, just really excited about this, and so definitely wanted to give it a shot. So the first thing that I really liked about it is that you got the Doors of Durin on the front with that beautiful artwork, and the two trees there and the door shimmering there before the lake. The game features some beautiful artwork by John Howe and a whole bunch of other creators as well, so definitely worth having a look at and diving into. If you are looking to get something beautiful, there you can see there's all the different artists that have been involved and the game designers and development and everything like that. So what is The War of the Ring, the card game? Because a lot of people will be very familiar with The War of the Ring itself. Well, The War of the Ring, the card game, is essentially a quick and easier way of playing out the entire adventure of the Fellowship from the Shire all the way to Mount Doom, without playing the large board game that takes like 4 hours to play or whatever. So, I mean, this game's not necessarily short by any means, but it's a much more cut down attempt at telling the tale of the Lord of the Rings. And the other thing that's really fun about it is that it goes up to, well, you can play it 2-player. You can, with both sides just taking on the role of the Free Peoples and the Shadow, or you can go up to 4-player, which is where I think the game shines, and has you taking on 2 people playing as the forces of good and 2 playing as evil, with 1 player taking on the role of Aragorn and some of the other characters, 1 person playing as Frodo, then you've got the Witch King and Saruman on the other side. So yeah, a really fun little rulebook, and it's actually not that long as well. I mean, the actual rulebook ends, rules-wise, about there, essentially. So, 18 pages in, which isn't too bad, really, when it comes to board game rules. And then you've got some stuff about scenarios and things, which we'll talk about in a little bit later as well. But, yeah. So, yeah, rulebook there. So then we got the card decks and stuff. So we'll have a flick through these, and we'll just have a look at some of the beautiful artwork and everything at the same time as we talk about the game. So in the game of the War of the Ring, the card game, you're going to be playing as teams, as I just suggested there. And you will be working to try and win a selection of path cards and battlefields throughout the process of your adventures. There's going to be, I think it's 9 paths and 9 battlefields that you'll play through. And at the end of the game, you're going to tot up who's won the most, see who comes out on top, and that will decree your winner. However, you can also end the game early by ending up with a bunch more victory points than the other player. I think it's like a difference of 10. I'll know a little bit more once I've dived in and actually played the game and stuff. But yeah, so lots of interesting cards there. Lovely stuff there. Gandalf the White looking beautiful. Gandalf the Grey. Oh, lovely. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, there are path and battlefield cards. So what's going to happen at the start of every turn that you're playing the game, I'm going to leave those there, is that you'll have these. So here you can see path cards, denoted by the word path next to them there. And each card will have an ability on it as well. And in the top, it's how many victory points you score for securing it. Now, when a path card comes out, you will be battling over it with your different characters, and if good win, then they just get the victory point in the corner. If evil win, then they get the amount of sort of shadow points they are able to put onto the location, which I think is kind of cool. Each location has kind of, in some cases, a built-in defense to it. but in a lot of cases, some of them you won't actually have any of them on there. And one of these will be sort of drawn at random. So you'll have 3 path cards that'll come out at the start of the game in your first turn, for example. So these are the 3 path cards, and you'll draw one at random and play it out on the tabletop. So it means that every time you sit down to play, it could be a little bit different, which is quite nice. I also like that they've gone through and put stuff in from the book, so you've got things like Gildor's encampment there, rather than it just being limited to what you see in things like the movies and stuff. So you've got the Inn of the Prancing Pony, the Old Forest, Weathertop, gorgeous artwork for Weathertop there, the Fords of Bruinen, Imladris, the Council of Elrond, Caradhras, Khazad-dûm, the Doors of Durin, the Dimral Dale, Egladil, Lothlorien, Amon Hen, the Dead Marshes, Emin Muil, Razor Sharp Rocks, Henneth Anun, Osgiliath, the Crossroads, Kirith Ongol, the Morgul Vale, Shelob's Lair, the Crack of Doom, Mordecai, and Orodruin itself. So yeah, so when path cards are played out, you'll be using characters, and you'll be taking their path strength effectively, so it's shown at the bottom there, and that denotes how much defense they can put to a location in order to keep it in your hands effectively if you're playing as good. You'll also note that some characters have little numbers on them. So Gimli cannot participate in path defense until you get to stage 3 through till 9, because obviously he doesn't come into the story until you reach Rivendell. You've also got Bilbo Baggins. He can't come in till 3. Well, he can take place in the 3rd sort of path section effectively, because you meet him in Rivendell. Fatty Bolger can be 1 and 2, because then he kind of just has to keep everybody safe in the Shire, since everyone else runs off. Frodo Baggins can be 1 to 9. Same with Merry, Pippin, and Sam, and all that kind of good stuff. You'll also notice that there's a bunch of other characters as well. So, some of these can't actually take part in paths. Some of these will just be there for battlefields and that kind of thing as well. And we'll talk through that in a second, which is quite nice. Got Gandalf there. Gwaihir, the Windlord. Quickbeam. Schmigol. Treebeard. And a bunch of other stuff as well. So yeah, very cool. And everything is represented in here, which is the nice thing, I suppose. On the other side of things, you have the battle cards. So let's take those player aids out for a second. So these battlefields, again, very similar. So you've got 1 and 1. So you've got a whole range of different battlefields. And with these ones, they can come out in pretty much any order, to be honest. And when they're played out onto the tabletop, they are done in the same fashion. So you play them out on the tabletop, and you will see some text on the cards. So you'll see who the defenders are. You'll see who the aggressors are. You'll be kind of like a player effect. And then there'll also be the victory points up in the top left as well. And when these are played out, they are dealt with in more or less the same fashion as with the with the path cards. Pardon me. In that you'll be using symbols to try and come out on top in terms of strength for different locations. We also note, so you've got lots of good locations here. So you've got all through there, and you've got evil locations. So this is sometimes where evil are going to be on the defense rather than good. The other thing that's really interesting about these as well is that you'll note that while path cards are interesting because they restrict people based on the storyline and where they are in the story, with the battlefield cards, they limit the factions that can fight there. So in this case, it's like the Haradrim can fight there, and Gondor and the sort of Fellowship can fight there. But with this, Rohan can fight in Edoras, but Ministers can't. But then with Edoras, Isengard can take the attack against them and stuff. Same with like Helm's Deep and that kind of thing. Elves can fight in Lorien, and then you've got like the dark creatures of Moria Mordor and stuff, which I think is kind of cool. So there's some limitations on who can fight at different locations and stuff, which I think is quite nice. And again, beautiful artwork on all of those cards. They'll also have effects on them. So obviously here you can see the doing and player may forsake one card and draw one card. We'll talk about that in a second as well. The game also, so you've got this little turn tracker, which is quite nice. Very cool. Which has been designed for 4-player and 2-player. Or 3 as well. And then you've got the scenario rules on the backs of these as well, which I think is quite nice. So there we go. Very good. Nice and helpful, which is very handy. And you can also see a breakdown of all the different factions, so you can see who works with those. So it wasn't Fellowship, sorry, it was Wizard. There you go. So that's all the faction symbols, which is going to be very helpful for people. And then you have some of the defenses and other symbols that you're going to be needing as well at the same time, which is kind of cool. So yeah, nice little handy references, and it kind of breaks down everything very nicely and very easily. Let's talk about these then, shall we? So if you're attacking a battlefield, you use these swords. If you're defending a battlefield, you use the shields. Now, the other thing you're probably going to be wondering is, how on earth do you actually kind of play cards on the tabletop? So you're going to have a hand of cards, and when it's your turn, you're going to choose whether or not you want to play a card. And if you do play a card, you will put it into play, or you can put it into reserve. But you also then need to cycle a card. So the resources in this game are also your deck. So say, for example, you wanted to play the Black Uruks. So you put them into play, and you'd have to think to yourself, okay, so what do I not need right now, but would be interesting to use later? Well, I don't need Grond currently, so I'll cycle Grond, and that goes into a sort of separate pile, and then the Black Uruks will go into play. So it's all about making interesting choices in the moment to make sure that you're able to plan for the future whilst also thinking about the present, which I think is quite an interesting way of thinking about things, which is very cool. You also see sort of like leadership symbols and stuff on here, which can be used if you're in charge. If you're, I can't actually remember what the leadership symbol does. I'm gonna have to look. I'm gonna look it up right now because I don't want to get it wrong. So, leadership symbol, leadership icons. Only if the character is supported. There you go, supported. Boom. So yes. So yeah, you've got this thing of kind of back and forth where you're playing cards out, and you're playing cards, but then you're also going to need to cycle cards through in order to keep your deck churning along. The other thing that's really interesting is that once you participate in paths and battles during the game, you will essentially you will lose characters from the game by taking part in these things. So they'll get put into like a separate pile next to your deck. So there's this kind of back and forth of, when do I use these characters? Do I use them at this particular moment? Do I wait? Do I kind of hold off to sort of make use of my better characters later on in the game, and that kind of thing, which I think is quite a nice little sort of back and forth. I mean, so you've got to make really interesting decisions in the moment, and you're like, oh man, do I really want to use Gandalf right now so that I can get in and start to make a difference, or do I keep him for later so that I can use him to make a difference on a different path card, and that kind of thing as well. So there's a nice back and forth between the different ways that you can play the game and sort of where it all goes. So yeah, let's just have a flick through this properly. So didn't necessarily see all of this. You got the Olog High, the Trolls of Udun, Gorbag and Shagrat, Grishnak, the Mouth of Sauron. Lots of different ring wraiths and stuff in the mix. Very cool that they can sort of take part in different paths, but also help on the battlefield if you support them, which I think is kind of cool. Nice stuff indeed. Beautiful artwork, as always. on these cards. So that's one of the evil decks. Oh, let's go to this side. So we've got more good here. So we've got the Dead Men of Dunharrow, the Knights of Dol Amroth. Really nice stuff there. That classic old artwork of Aragorn and Boromir as well. Denethor, Faramir, Halbarad. Let's have a look at Boromir. So he can fight in different things, but he only takes part in path things between 3 and 6. So yeah. And this is really interesting because you've got cards that are specifically more powerful at certain paths. So this could be really fascinating to see how all the game changes up as you're going through. It's also nice to see other characters in the mix. Say you have the likes of Prince Imrahil rather than it just being like the stuff that people remember from the movies, which is always good to see. So yeah, the Blades of Westerness, the Three Hunters, that classic artwork. I really like that. The Elves, who will not be doing a lot other than staying in reserve most of the time, which is quite interesting. So yeah, when played, draw a card. While in reserve, increase your carryover limit by 1, which I think is quite nice. So you've got ways of carrying over stuff. Carrying over cards between rounds. Very cool. Beautiful. And then we have the last of the decks, which is this one. The Devilry of Sauron. And the Uruk-hai coming into play. So this is your other evil deck that you can play around with, which is very cool. And then here are all your kind of monsters and stuff from the Misty Mountains. The Balrog of Morgoth. Very nice. Barrow Whites. Caradhras the Cruel, the Storm Giants. And then your Haradrim, or your Southrons. Very nice indeed. So yeah, the game's kind of played out over the sort of the cross of sort of 9 rounds essentially. So it's going to go back. So on your turn, you're going to get one of the 3 path cards to fight over using your path stats, your sort of journey stats essentially. And then you're going to get, on a good player's turn, you'll get a good battlefield. So these are going to be separated out into 2 decks. So you'll have that deck and that deck sort of sat on the board. And then on a good player turn, you'll draw one of these. On an evil player turn, you'll draw one of these. And you will fight over those, and you will try and secure the victory points that you see in the top. And it's basically the person who comes out with the most victory points is the winner, which I think is kind of cool. There's other bits and pieces in there, so you've got lots of nice tokens for marking damage and that kind of thing as well. You also got the ring token, which is a nice little bit of additional stuff which can be used to get you out of jail, which I think is quite nice, which is very cool. But yeah, the game sounds like a really fun sort of take on the story of the Lord of the Rings, but in a quicker format. I really like that you're going to get you kind of get this, we're telling our new story of the Lord of the Rings in the way that things come out. A little bit like the board game in that respect, where sort of you tell your version of the Lord of the Rings rather than specifically the one from the books, which is quite nice. So yeah, just have a quick look through the rulebook as well. And it's quite, you can get this online. I'll put a link down below so you can go and have a look at it properly so you can see what you think of it, which is quite nice. There's a bit which was kind of interesting. So I like the idea that you can play to reserve, but also into the battlefield. So you can have those reserve cards there to help you as you're going through the game, but then you can have others kind of actually actively fighting. So it's a really interesting way of kind of representing the fact that Elrond didn't necessarily help in all of the stuff that's happening in Middle-earth, but he was always there in the background, kind of joining in effectively, which I thought was quite nice. There are also ways to kind of like mitigate your bad luck and things. So you can always do things like eliminate 2 cards, which means they're completely out of the game, to draw cards and stuff like that. And the ring helps you draw cards as well. I think it's quite nice. Yeah, what was the thing? There's an interesting thing where you kind of dive into the outcome of stuff. So there we go. At the end of the path combat, the free people's character must be limited. If a free people's character must be limited if it cancels even a single icon, regardless of how many icons it has. So yeah, at the end of the path combat, all shadow characters in that combat are eliminated. If the free people's player cannot decide which characters to eliminate, the shadow player can decide for them. So this is kind of interesting. So as you can see here, you are using these and they're going to be eliminated from the game, but that I like the idea that you can kind of try and put enough characters into something so that you can keep them for future endeavors and that kind of thing. But it's also kind of like keeping an eye on your resources and where they go and stuff, which I think is quite interesting. But yeah, very cool. And then you've got the same with Battleground Combat as well. So again, a defending character must be limited if it cancels even 1 icon, regardless of how many defense it has. At the end of the Battleground Combat, all attacking cards are eliminated. So yeah, it's a really one where you're going to have to use your resources in a way that kind of benefits you the most, which I think is quite nice. So yeah. Very cool. Nice. There's your scoring things. So yeah, there's something about scoring if you have... Yeah, if one team's score is 10 or more, then they win immediately, which ends the game. I think it's quite nice. But I think most of the time you're going to end up with this kind of situation at the end of it. Then you've got different scenario styles. So a lot of people, you'll just mostly play the trilogy scenario, which takes you from beginning to end. And you can play it with 4 players. And it tells you how to do the decks, which are all sorted in the box. Or you can play it with 2 or 3 if you want. And there's also a 2-player duel, which is played out quicker. And there's also a 3-player duel as well. And then there's also the Fellowship of the Ring scenario, which has been designed for 2 players and is a way to kind of learn the game and play through the first book in the 3. I think the designer has also designed a Two Towers variant and a Return of the King variant, I think, as well. So you're not just limited to just playing through the Return of the King. You can play with different versions if you like. And then, so there's the thing about support. So for a character's leadership icons to count, the character must be on the same battlefield as a supporting army of the same faction. An army can only support 1 character. So that's how you use the supporting thing. So Nazgul aren't very good on the battlefield on their own, but they can be good if they are supported by orcs. I think it's quite nice. You know, I'm yet to actually properly dive in and give this a go, so some of my rules are probably going to be a little bit off. But as you can tell, I think you can, as you can probably tell, I'm quite excited by this game and giving it a go and diving in. As I say, been waiting for this for a really long while, and so it's really nice to see the game in my hands with all this beautiful artwork. Oh, I love it. But yeah. I think they've done a really awesome job with this, and from the sound of it, it's going to be absolutely bonkers to play. I'm really interested to give it a go and dive in further. And of course, I'm going to be playing as Rohan and Bilbo and stuff, obviously. So I get access to Gandalf and the rest of the Fellowship, duh, and also Ents, of course. So yeah, very cool stuff from the folks at Ares, and can't wait to see where they go with it in the future as well. Eowyn, one of my favourite characters. Amazing. Yeah, just some kind of like first impressions, unboxing-y type reviews stuff for the War of the Ring. As I say, was quite excited to see this, and so it's nice to be able to dive in and have fun with it. I'll probably come back and give you a proper review once I've properly played the game and how to read the rules all the way through and stuff. But until then, hopefully this was quite an interesting sort of look at how the game works ish. And whether or not it might be for you. I do like the idea that it's got this kind of like back and forth and the tug of war between the different locations, and the fact that you have to make hard decisions and that kind of stuff as well, which is very in keeping with, you know, like things like the FFG card game and also the War of the Ring as well. So yeah, should be a lot of fun to dive into this and give it a go. Don't forget to like, share, comment, do all that good stuff in the comments down below. There's also a Ko-fi link if you fancy doing some donations for me to get a cup of tea or something at the same time. Yay. But I'm going to move on to another video. I'll be back in the near future. Bye for now.